Yeah, so for the U2, when we were in combat, we had Go Gel. So
Okay.
um, it was very interesting because it was a different philosophy. With the old heads were like, we didn't have to use that. That's like a
Yeah.
crutch. And I'm like, yo, bro, I don't like caffeine. I don't drink a lot of caffeine. And if you give me 250 milligrams in a plane before I land, I'm like a caged animal. Like I go off. Like I
Yeah.
was off the charts. And I was like, oh, go gel. Definitely, you have a routine. And if it was interrupted for me, I would stop. Because I'm like, what are the fates doing to me right now? Like in my
Yeah.
mind, I go, oh, playing games, I see.
Yeah.
I'm ready for you.
Yeah.
All Fire, No Smoke is our candid conversation as two military aviators sharing the unique experiences we've had in combat, reconnaissance, and demonstration flying.
Through personal stories, technical details, and laughter, we explore the challenges of balancing leadership, motherhood, professional life, all while offering inspiring insights for those who are trying to strike that work-life balance.
I'm Meryl Tangestal, retired Air Force Colonel. You guys might know me as the Dragon Lady. I flew the SH-60 helicopter in the Navy before switching over to the Air Force and becoming the first and only black woman to fly the U-2 spy plane. My last job was at the Pentagon, where I was the Director of Inspection for the Inspector General.
I'm retired Lieutenant Colonel Caroline Jensen. I go by the call sign Blaze. I flew the F-16 Fighting Falcon, better known as the Viper, in the Air Force during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and was later selected as the first female reserve officer to fly with the prestigious United States Air Force Air Demonstration Squadron, known as the Thunderbirds. My son also happened to be the first kid to ever get to watch his mom fly with an advanced jet demo team. All right. So I think one thing that pilots really like is to tell stories. And in a fighter pilot bar, joke about shooting your watch. There I was.
Yes.
Type of stories, and there's a rule, but we're not going to abide by this rule today. But
No.
it only has to be 10% true.
Yeah.
So today we're going to go 100% true.
Oh.
And talk about some things in the cockpit that maybe were surprising. Do you have any like there I was stories, crazy like lost an engine, something got on fire, somebody got in a disagreement in your
Yeah, so I mean, for me, knock on wood that um most of my emergencies were minimal. They were I mean, I had, great maintenance crew that kept the aircraft good. Maybe I had an engine high light in the U2 flying over some desert terrain where there's nothing around. I'm like, when the light goes on, it's like one of those like, oh, oh man. Like it's like that moment like you're just like, oh. But yeah, I don't really have any. I've never had any engine failures. I've had few bird strikes, not a big
Mhm.
deal. Um, I mean, they're a big deal, but they were in places, nothing major, nothing catastrophic. Um, but I did have like there I was story when I was flying helicopters at
What
night.
happened
Yeah,
at
so
night? That's gotta be fun. Were you
yeah,
on night vision goggles or no?
no night vision goggles. This is the first time I was a helicopter second pilot, got qualified. I was done with training, and I went to deploy on my first deployment. I was on a two ship det as a helicopter second pilot, H2P, and we were on the Normandy ship, and we were doing training sorties. So we were doing workups. So we had a month workup, JTFX.
Okay.
It was a joint exercise. The whole battle, the George Washington Battle Group, which we were part of, we were doing exercises. So as part of this exercise, we had to find one of our subs, and we were hunting the sub. And hunting subs are fun, and especially when you can go active on sonobuoys, because now you're pinging, you're taking the sonobuoy and actually actively pinging,
Wow.
putting frequencies in the water, and it's bouncing back. We had to find a sub, so we were going to do a 7-hour mission. Uh, Usually 3 to 3.5 hours prior, we go on another ship, refuel, and go back off. So we're on our first bag, and we're flying. And I'm with an aircraft commander, and like you said, 100% truth.
Yeah.
So Look, he was an okay guy. He kind of had a chip on his shoulder, but he wasn't the strongest pilot. He had the reputation of not being the strongest pilot. But he was kind of a loudmouth. And so we're flying at night, and there's an air crewman in the back. We always have one who was relatively. I think this was his first time as well, but he was good. And we're tracking the sub. We know where the sub is. Part of the training mission was you had to visually ID it at night. It was stupid. Okay, so we're like, all right, we know where it's at. We're at 200 feet. We're flying around. We know it's there, but we can't see it because it's dark, not a lot of moon. And so we couldn't go below 200 feet. Why? I know. Why do you ask?
Why could you not go below 200 feet to visually identify something at night without night vision devices?
Because a couple of months prior, there was a crew that was doing night ops, and they went below 200 feet, and they lost situational awareness and put a perfectly good aircraft in the water.
Ooh. Did the crew make it out?
They did. They all made it out, and they briefed all the squadrons about it. That was part of, I don't want to say penance, but that was part of the thing. You make a mistake, you tell everyone. And so they changed the standard operating procedures that at nighttime, no lower than 200 feet.
Oh, man.
However, we come up with the most brilliant idea. What was the idea? That we could do a coupled approach in the helicopter.
Okay.
You could do an automatic approach down to 50 feet and hold a hover. Didn't say you couldn't do it at night because it was a coupled approach.
Wow.
And so the three ding-dongs in the helicopter, and that's what I'm going to call us, yes, me included, decided that this would be a great idea to go do that. Because what could possibly happen?
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? So my aircraft commander says, pull out the checklist, start going through the checklist. I'm new, nighttime, I'm fumbling with pages. I don't know, I'm being a rookie. Like, I'm just dumb. And I'm like, I can't find it. And I'm looking through the pages. And he's getting frustrated. In the meantime, the air crewman in the back is tethered to the aircraft, but he's looking out the side trying to find the aircraft because we just had to drop a light on it. And as I'm looking for the checklist, my aircraft commander starts a descent manually without saying anything.
Oh.
Yeah.
Not good.
No, well, it gets worse.
Oh, no.
So I'm in there and I'm looking through it. I'm like, dude, I can't find it. I know what page it's on. I'm not sure. I started getting flustered. And then I felt the aircraft just do this. And the first thing you do when you feel that, you go right. If you feel something weird, where do your eyes go to first? In an aircraft if you're flying.
Engines.
I went to altitude.
Okay. Helicopter versus a jet.
Yeah, so for some reason I went to altitude. We were descending through 20 feet.
Oh, boy.
So
what was the little bump?
It
Just
rode a wash. I don't know what.
The grace of God. Just give me a little pat on the
the Grim Reaper's like, hey. And so I look up and we're descending through 20 feet. And I say power and I grab the collective. And I grab an armpit full of collective. I just pull. The air crewman, he was looking outside in the pitch black. He couldn't see anything. He looked inside of his instruments because he had a panel. He had basically one MFD. And he said, we stopped descending around 6 feet.
Jeez.
And so we pulled power. He got spatially disoriented, but he didn't say anything. And so I relied that he was going to maintain the 200 feet. And the whole cockpit was quiet for the remainder of the flight. We refueled, we continued. And, typically in Air Force fashion, and I will say this was something wrong for me, but as a 2P, seeing your life flash before your eyes very quickly and saying, oh crap, we're about to do the same thing another group of people just did not only like months ago. And I was like, man, can you imagine just sitting, in that long table with your peers judging you? Yeah. We were all wrong. And so we left that night. We didn't debrief. And, it was just a big eye-opener for me, like, hey, this is F around and find out. And when you fly with people, you have to, cockpit resource management, good crew coordination is highly important. But as a 2P, never think that your words mean nothing. If you're a new co-pilot, if you're new anything, don't think that just because you're new, you don't know. And I knew this pilot was not the strongest of pilots, and I kind of slept on him. I relied on him maybe too much to hold the altitude and to do that pilot stuff, and he wasn't successful. So I think from that, it was a good lesson for me that I lived
Yeah.
through, that like, nah, well, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Even the best pilots can have the worst days, and the not so good pilots, their worst day is a really, really bad day. So
Yeah.
that's the lesson learned.
Yeah. Sometimes better lucky than good too.
Oh yeah,
and
we were lucky that night.
yeah.
If there was a sea state going on, it would have been a wrap.
Yeah, I was going to ask what the sea state was, because if
Yeah,
you're
it's
at
pretty
6
calm.
feet, what is it? That's over sea level.
Yeah,
Literally.
so it was a calm night.
Wow. That's scary.
Yeah, I wouldn't be here today.
No.
No. What about you? What do you got? What do you have?
Well, I think one of the scariest things that happened to me, it ended up not really being a big deal, but it really could have been a big deal. And it was in Ypsilanti, Michigan, on the Thunderbirds.
What is it?
Ypsilanti.
Ypsilanti?
Yeah. Ypslianti. Ypsilanti. Hopefully I got that right.
To all the 2 people that live in Ypsilanti, hi.
It's a pretty big town, actually.
Is it?
Yeah.
20 people?
Yeah. No, it's a beautiful town. We had to actually go out that morning, and the truck that they used to clear all the foreign object damage, the FOD, the rocks, everything off, it had bristles that were breaking off. And so there were little bristles like all over the place. And the community was amazing. Gathered together with the team, we went out and walked the entire runway picking up chunks
Bristles.
of things. So that was how that show had started. But we were taking off, and the show line is basically where all the maneuvers go at an air show. And normally, and on this show, it was also parallel to where all the public is standing. So
Is the shoreline imaginary reference point, or is it actually painted on the ground for you to see?
yes, both of them. Like, hopefully, an ideal show site, the runway is long enough so that an F-16 can take off on it. We needed 8,000 feet, 7,000 minimum at the time, but that runway wasn't long enough for us. But that's where all the people were standing, like off the side of that runway.
Oh, okay.
And they had a perpendicular runway that we took off, and we took off towards the shoreline.
Oh.
So we took off, and off to the right, then as we're taking off, that's where all of the people are. And we're going to take off and do a right turn over the crowd to get set up for the opener for the show. And we take off, and I hear thump, thump. The gears go up, and then I hear thump. And I'm like, that was too many thumps for the gear doors coming up. And we start this slow turn, and I'm like, holy crap. And so it's a single engine aircraft.
Yes.
Nice big Hoover vacuum cleaner intake, sucking everything in. And you're also flying in formation really close to other aircraft. And I'm on the bottom of this turn. And I'm like, hey, boss, 3 needs to knock it off. So we go, 1, knock it off, 2, knock it off, 3, knock it off, 4, knock it off. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I hit a bird. I need to climb immediately and set up for a straight-in landing, because it can take a while for the bird guts to kind of go through and start ripping things. Yeah. On that one beautiful engine, very powerful engine. But when it gets like a 50-pound bird, or I think the bird ended up being like 30 pounds going into the aircraft. So we separate. I climb up. In a airplane, you'd really want to get really high. In a single engine aircraft, unfortunately, we had clouds, so I couldn't climb above about 5,000 feet.
Okay.
So I'm below, if the engine quits, I'm below where I can land. I just had to make sure I wasn't pointed towards the crowd anymore.
What's your glide ratio? Because in the U2, the glide ratio clean aircraft is about 30 to 1.
No, we plan a 1-to-1 glide ratio.
So can you explain that? Like, for what does 1 to 1 mean?
So every 1,000 feet, you can go 1 mile. So it's like a lawn dart is another name for
Yes.
the F-16. So, yeah.
So you're 1 to 1, and we're 30 to 1.
Yeah. And I could not get high enough to make it all the way around, which I was actually going to ask you about the glide ratio. So it's interesting.
Yes.
So I climb up as high as I can. I get someone to look me over really quick. And he's like, yeah, I can see there's some like smears on the airplane I set up, and I make a landing. Thank goodness. I didn't lose thrust. I could smell something a little bit funny. In the airplane, the engine instruments all looked okay. I came back, and so I landed on that perpendicular runway to where all the people were, and I'd done all my maneuvering away from them, and I'm rolling out, and our crew chiefs were standing at the end of the runway. And mind you, the Thunderstruck by AC/DC is playing. Like, everyone's waiting for the show to start. And I roll into the chocks, and my crew chiefs are there, and all of their eyes get like huge, and they're like, holy cow. And so I had hit a hawk, and a
Aw.
whole like arm, like wing of this like hawk had gone into the intake, and thank God that the body stayed on the outside of the intake, but it cracked a hole about that big underneath the inlet of the F-16.
Yeah, that was a big hawk.
Yeah, they do like forensics and stuff on it, and I think they think it was probably about 30 pounds. Like, you could make that for Thanksgiving dinner.
As chief of flight safety, I would have been out there with a swab. Ooh, this is interesting. Let's put it in a bag, and it stinks. Let's put it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that when we hit birds, we take samples and send them.
We do send them.
For record.
So all the environmental people out there, yeah, we take samples and we send it so they could track migration patterns and they could see what type of bird it is or wildlife. Because in the U-2, the U-2 engine's pretty robust. One time, I wasn't flying, but the canopy went through the intake.
Nuh-uh.
It was fine.
What? The canopy went through the intake?
Yeah, and then
How high was the plane?
I think they had just taken off, and they were either in the pattern. I don't know the whole story.
Wow.
I'll get the story next time.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
The U-2 kept going.
That's pretty good.
Good job, GE.
Yeah, we'd close the canopy on the F-16 even if it was really hot outside because the canopy was so low to where we were sitting. And so it's kind of cool. Like they say, you know, you're strapping on this like airplane. It kind of becomes an extension of you, but you're sitting up so high, and it's a bubble canopy. Like it's kind of like Wonder Woman's invisible jet. Like you get in it and you can see everything around you. So it's pretty great. But part of it, like your knee is almost above, and all of your mission materials, papers, especially if you're in combat or you have this complicated mission, you can have like a stack of like 20 papers. And the last thing you want is for those things to go like out of the cockpit. And into the intake.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, just over the side. So if that happens, you got to shut it down pretty quick. And,
the U-2 when we fly, when we're in a pressure suit, normal if we're doing a low flight, we don't wear the pressure suit unless for some other reason. But we wear normal flight suit, knee board. But pressure suit, we have boards.
Oh,
so
that's big.
Yeah,
that's about the size of an F-16 cockpit, by the way. Not that big.
So you take your boards and you're like, board number 1, because the gloves you wear, it's very hard, no tactile feel or anything. So for those who don't know, when we're in the pressure suit in the U-2, we call it suit stupid, like because you can't hear, you don't really hear engine noises.
Oh, that's scary.
You don't smell anything. You smell 100% oxygen, and occasionally if you crank a little burnt. And it's kind of wretched that they may be, but you're usually cut off here. And then, you're hearing, so all your senses are dulled a little bit. So when you're trying to find something, you're like, I'm really good in the car. If I want to get something, I just go in the back and, I can feel out what it is and bring it to the front. My kids are like, Mom, what are you doing? I'm like, yeah.
Because you can look about this far. Like,
so it's not
5 degrees either way, maybe.
Yeah, pulling out a circuit breaker is very challenging. We have circuit breaker pullers that are little clips that come in and pull it out. So you go back there, find the circuit breaker, and
can you use your bare hand? Can you take off the glove to do that?
If you're up at altitude, you can't because you break the seal. So you don't have the suit won't pressurize correctly if there's a cockpit depressurization. So for us, if there's an emergency, we're just kind of slow. Like you're kind of like the sloth because everything is coming a little slower to you. Like you're like, oh, warning light. Oh, fire. Can't smell anything. Engine instruments. Yeah, so yes. So bird strikes we don't usually get bird strikes in the U-2.
Okay.
Mobile cars, chase cars have a better chance of hitting wildlife.
Yeah.
They've hit coyotes on the runway.
Wow.
Yeah. Like destroyed a chase vehicle.
They're just staying there staring at.
Yeah, the coyotes like.
Was it Mustangs you drove most of the time or?
So I drove Camaro. When I was in the program, Camaros, GTOs, and I think they went to the G8. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But it was more comfortable now, not the Mustang.
Okay.
Camaros were annoying because they were just really low and it's hard to fit in.
Yeah.
And pilots are gross, so, you know.
Yeah. That's funny.
Any superstitions from an F-16 perspective that you practice?
Well, I didn't have. Well, I would always use my piddle pack. I would pee before I took off,
Hmm.
so I didn't have to go in the airplane because it's really hard. There's not a lot of room in the cockpit, and you don't want to be distracted if you have to go to the bathroom while you're, like flying a large force engagement and you've got like 50 other airplanes in the area. It's really distracting if you have to go. So I'd usually like, whether I had to go or not, like your parents like better leave before we leave the house. So I would do that. But I actually was really motivated because when I wanted to be a fighter pilot, women weren't allowed to do it. And so the World War II Women Air Force Service pilot had flown all the pursuit planes. They'd done everything since except for combat back in the 40s. So I have this really cool patch, and it's made out of leather, and it's got Fifanella, which was designed by Walt Disney, and it was the patch for the World War II Wasp. And
Okay.
so almost all of probably every single combat mission I flew, I had it on my kneeboard. Every flight I had with Thunderbirds, like the patch has logged almost as many hours, like almost 3,500. It's probably logged like 3,000 hours flying on my knee. So that's one. My crew chiefs on the Thunderbirds, they would take pictures and they'd laminate them and put them on like really heavy duty Velcro. And so I had pictures like of my son in the cockpit. Behind me, he's wearing a little flight suit and with his little name tag and everything. So that was neat. And then when we'd fly cross country, like say you flew from Las Vegas to Atlantic City for an air show, it was like a 5-hour flight. And as soon as you shut down the engines and you open that up, like the press is there and they're like walking over. So you're like, I just got done flying in this really tiny airplane for 5 hours, probably sitting in it for 6. And I need to get out and talk to reporters like within a couple of minutes. So
with your piddle pack?
Yeah, you're like trying to discreetly like hand your piddle packs over because you don't want to leave them in the cockpit.
I
But
would just hand it to the reporters.
But you always want to look good, right? So I'd have my lip gloss, and my crew chiefs put my lip gloss on a Velcro thing, made a little lip gloss holder in the side of the cockpit for me, so I could just like put my lip gloss on. And
why did we not have a lip gloss holder right here on the chair?
Yeah, seriously, we should have had that.
Next time. Next time.
I'll do better with it.
Yeah. Yep, just open her up, lip gloss. So, and that kind of goes back to the WASP too. Jackie Cochran and Nancy Love were the two women that started programs that became the WASP for women to fly. And Jackie Cochran actually owned a cosmetics company, and she would always tell the women, like, you need to look good when you get out of the airplane. So, but you go to a city, and who watches the nightly news and like, I don't know, Fort Worth, like there's a lot of people. So,
Yes.
and it's not vanity for me. I felt like a lot of it was like, I really want to represent the Air Force. We were counting like 600,000 people, between Guard, Reserve, active duty, civilians. And so you're like, well, I want to present well for all of those people that I'm presenting and to be the face for the Thunderbirds that are in this community for the next like 3 or 4 days. So
That's very nice.
Yeah, that was kind of a ritual, I guess.
I would never be good Thunderbird material because I would have.
You'd be surprised.
I'd be a jokester. Like
Yeah.
I would have done something like put like cat whiskers and walked
Yeah.
out. And they'd be like, "What?"
Yeah.
It's gonna
You'd
be a fun
surprised.
show. Yes.
So did you log combat time in both the helicopters and the U-2?
So I did. Helicopters, they wouldn't let us do combat time, but we did combat support missions. Okay. So I do have my logbook back in like 97, 98, combat support time. So we did stuff in the KAA when we were in North Arabian Gulf. U2 time, I have over 300 hours.
Okay.
So logged in supportive operation during Freedom, Iraq Freedom.
Okay.
Yes.
So you've got, how many hours do you have flying aircraft now?
Like over 3,400. So I have a little over 1,000 U2. Helicopter time, if you look at my TH-57 time, which was the trainer, and helicopters, it was over 1,000.
Okay.
T6s was close to 1,000. It was like 950.
Yeah.
So instructor time, and then the T-38 instructor time and T6.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but Man, T-38 get instructor time
Yeah.
1.0 or 0.9 of the time is painful.
You're working hard.
You're
for
working
those.
hard to
Yeah.
get your time, yes.
So in all of that time, all the different aircraft, did you have a ritual that you came up with that you would
The
do?
only ritual was really for the U2 because my concern, especially as I was getting older, I was like, man, I can't poop in the suit. Like for some reason, I
Yeah.
got really fixated around the whole
Yeah.
number 2 thing. So I would try to do that on 100% oxygen before with my back of my suit open. But um, man, I wouldn't eat about 24 hours prior, so that would make me a little lethargic. But
Did you
then
eat them right before you went?
no,
Okay.
I would wait 4 hours in the flight.
Okay.
I would have my first tube food, and then I would pop my Go Gel. So I don't know if you guys did Go pills.
We had them very limited.
Really?
We did in combat. We could have Go pills.
Yeah. So for the U2, when we were in combat, we had Go Gel. So
Okay.
um, it was very interesting because it was a different philosophy. With the old heads were like, we didn't have to use that. That's like a
Yeah.
crutch. And I'm like, yo, bro, I don't like caffeine. I don't drink a lot of caffeine. And if you give me 250 milligrams in a plane before I land, I'm like a caged animal. Like I go off. Like I
Yeah.
was off the charts. And I was like, oh, Go Gel. It's a small dosage. It keeps me
Is
very.
that what it was? Caffeine?
Um,
Because
we
I
we
always
did
thought our Go pills were like a
dexamphetamine.
medicinal, yeah, like a methamphetamine.
Yes.
Yeah.
So our Go Gel was methamphetamine. Well, methamphetamine-ish. Don't think.
Yeah.
But we had caffeinated pudding, and then eventually they introduced caffeinated apple pie,
Oh.
caffeinated, they call it Jazzy Mac, caffeinated mac and cheese. And I wouldn't eat any of those. So I was more of the vegetarian pasta, eat some sweets. So
Yeah.
that's what I would do. So after the first 4 hours, I would eat some food, and then I would have a Go Gel, and I'd be like, oh, I feel good now.
Yeah.
I do the rest. And then the other thing when I'm flying to U2, I would occasionally whistle. And if I couldn't whistle, that means I didn't have enough saliva. So that meant I needed to drink more water and stay hydrated. It was weird.
Yeah. You know, when you were talking, it reminded me of those rituals and the things that you do every time, like going to the bathroom, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
And when I was a brand new student going through T-38 training, I think as a pilot, for our pilots who listen or anyone who does things that are dangerous, even getting in your car, when something throws you off of your normal routine, like you need to be more alert. And there was one day when you fly the T-38, you bring your parachute out with you.
Yes.
And then you do your walk around wearing your parachute, you crawl up into the cockpit and sit down, and then you clip into the airplane, and the parachute is strapped to you.
Yes.
The F-16, the parachute's built into the ejection seat, and you have to like clip into that way. But this one day, flying a T-38 wearing my parachute, it was raining. And when it rains, you don't want to get your parachute wet because it will turn into a block of ice if you have to eject at really high altitude, and it might not deploy properly. So we put our parachutes into the cockpit, did the walk around. I hopped in, threw on my shoulder straps. My crew chief said something to me. I get everything set up. I fly a whole mission. I come back and I stand up, and I had not done my leg straps like go fall. So had I ejected during this flight, I would have been free falling without a parachute, watching my parachute above me like all the way. And so that was a really good lesson to learn early on, that when you get thrown out of those habit patterns, especially when you're in training and like the tension's a little bit higher, to make sure that you don't miss anything. And I was lucky, I had some amazing, like we talked about, amazing crew chiefs that help. You know, we fly single engine airplanes, but there's like hundreds of people that make that happen. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to. But I had crew chiefs who were like, hey man, you want to make sure you check your G suit hose, or you know. But anytime I got out of my rhythm and routine, I just be like, all right, let's double triple check.
Yeah, let's go back.
Yeah,
let's go back to this point and just go
Yeah.
through. Yeah. Definitely, you have a routine, and if it was interrupted for me, I would stop because I'm like, what are the fates doing to me right now? Like in my mind, I go, oh, playing games. I see.
Yeah.
I'm ready for you.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's good. That's good advice.
Mhm.
Any other stories that you have that there was some lessons learned that you got over time?
Yeah, I flew a little bit over 200 hours worth of combat in Iraq. And when we were spinning up to go, the director of operations for my squadron was like, "Oh, we'll have day pilots and night pilots." Well, the sun doesn't normally go like within 12-hour periods, and really if you break it up so that it makes sense, you're doing 3 8-hour shifts throughout the day. So you've got people that are transitioning between day and night, but we had folks in our squadron. I was one of them. I was almost out of night currency when I got to Iraq, and it was time to take off because I was going to be a day pilot. And so I ended up being this like mid shift, but because of the way the seasons were, I flew most of my sorties at night. So I took off for my first flight at night over Iraq. They just like had us take off, and it was called an XCAS mission. We stayed over Balad. We were getting mortared at the time, like quite regularly. So they had us up there to kind of do overwatch for the base. And I took off in my radio. I was like, we switched frequencies. There's all this like jamming going on. And I'm like, there's 2 radios in the F-16, a uniform and a Victor radio, UHF, VHF. And I could talk to him kind of on one, but I couldn't hear anything that was going on, jamming. It was like a 2-hour mission at night. And I felt like I had a bag over my head the whole time. Like, I can't hear anything. I can't see anything. I'm trying to get used to night vision goggles again. Like, thankfully, I didn't go blind. I stayed safe. Like, I didn't impact the mission or the safety of the base or my flight or anybody. But we landed, and I was like, man, I need to do that again. So I went out the next night. Went out with one of the weapons school guy from the base. He'd been there for a while. And so I'm flying on his wing. And these F-16s had just been upgraded to have a new, different computer. And we were still learning a lot about the changes in this new system in the airplane. And we are headed east out of Iraq.
Okay.
And it's pitch black.
I'm looking at the
Yeah, you're thinking
map.
about your map in your mind.
Yeah, the map.
Well, Iran is over there.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So we're headed, east. And I am rejoining on him, and we're talking to the controller who's giving us like our tasking and giving us the location that we're supposed to be at. And it went pitch black. Like my cockpit just went, everything powered down in my cockpit. And it goes from beautiful, bright, comfortable heat, whatever, to like, did I just like pass out? Like what happened? And everything went out. And then things just kind of slowly started coming back online. And it was some malfunction with this like new system. And we were still like learning how to understand it. And there were like pages of things to go through. And it's like, you can't even tell what's missing. Cause at one point everything basically went down, and then things just came back online on their own without me even flipping a switch. So I'm like, hey, flight lead, I just had like a electrical failure. I need to go back to the base before it becomes like a permanent problem, because getting back into base was like a whole nother crazy event, because they changed how you entered every time to keep things secure, and they renamed points, and there were different altitudes at ranges and angles off of the runway. So
it was much needed.
So it was, but let's get back before, I'm having to figure this out completely in the dark. And so he's like, yeah, okay, you just keep heading east, and I'm going to spin back around and get you. And I was like, like rejoins at night can be kind of tough. And the person I was flying with, like, he probably hasn't rejoined at night in a long time. So I was a little bit worried about that. And I'm trying to talk to him, and he doesn't say anything to me. And then I'm like, I feel like I'm getting too far east. Like, we've been driving east for a really long time.
When the hairs in the back of your neck stand up, like you're like, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Something's wrong.
But the last thing I want to do at night is just do an commanded, uncommunicated, like turn into someone who probably has a lot of closure on me. And I was just like, I don't know if I can take it anymore. And my radio rolls through, like, I had lost uniform and I had Victor, and then vice versa at one other point. And all of a sudden I get like the uniform radio back, and I hear the controller go, she needs to turn east really fast, or she's going to end up like in an international incident. And so I'm like, I'm already in a turn left. Like, and in my mind, I'm like, please don't hit me. So I'm like, thank God. So we rejoined. The systems kind of were wonky, but I still had everything. The gear came down normal, everything. And I landed, and I was like, oh, thank God. And I look at he dropped me off. My flight lead came back, followed me. He dropped me off. He goes around. Guess what? His gear didn't come down.
Oh.
So no, actually his gear got stuck down. He did an approach with me with the gear down. And then they wouldn't come up. So it's better to be stuck down.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. So
than up. But it was just like, man, what is going on? There's like gremlins everywhere. Everything's getting messed up.
When you check the tapes, how close?
I never remember. We had I didn't get there was no international incident.
Okay.
Whatever the classified buffer was for the border, I got pretty close, but I didn't. But when you're in an F-16 going like 350 knots, like you're going 8 miles a minute. So,
And-
I was probably within 60 seconds of violating a border and starting World War III. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, don't worry. It
wasn't my fault.
it's not my. Iran's a little. They could be a little.
Yeah.
They just.
They don't like unannounced guests
No,
in their
they don't.
country.
No.
Especially in a war fighting aircraft. So.
True. And they used to like say hi to you sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, good morning,
Yeah.
Iran. How are you? I see you. I'm not gonna deviate. I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
So, that's pretty cool. What other stories?
Well, there was a day. I don't think I want to tell the whole story from like the attack all the way through.
Yeah.
I got it. So there was a day that we went out, my wingman and I, and he was a pretty new wingman, and it was towards the beginning of our tour.
Okay.
And we had an attack that we had to employ weapons, and there had been some difficulties with his system, and basically he ended up not dropping a bomb. The bomb we dropped still destroyed the target, did everything that we needed to do, so it was still a success, right? So
Real quick, how long were your deployments?
our deployment was about 6 months, and it depended. Like, I always feel bad saying that as an Air Force person, because the poor Army would go over there for like a year.
14 months.
Yeah, more. Yeah.
So I feel even worse. In the U2, because of the prolonged exposure, we would go 60 days on, then 60 days off. So we
Yeah.
would, to go like 90 days, you needed a waiver, or to go beyond 90 days, you needed a waiver, which happened to some people. But
Yeah.
But at that time, when I was flying U2s, a lot of people were getting some type of related brain type injuries that were going on,
Wow.
like concussion type stuff happening. So it was a group of people. So anyway, so 6
Wow.
months.
Yeah. So we were there at the beginning. Maybe we had been there a month,
Okay.
and then we were a really young squadron. We were very successful, and all the guys on the ground loved working with us. And this particular day, we'd had things the mission was a success, but it hadn't worked out for him the way it was supposed to. So he was a little bit frazzled, and we head up north, and we're on our last mission. We're running out of fuel. We've already hit our last tanker, and then we had to return to base pretty soon. And so we're out there, and we're talking to a joint terminal attack controller, a guy on the ground who's helping to put our sensors where they need to go so we can help patrol, make sure there's no bad guys out there doing bad things. And so one of the things we would do is look along the road, and you'd look through an infrared target pod for hot spots or cold spots, because the enemy would bury explosive devices on the side of the road, or they would put it into a dead animal and leave it on the side of the road, or they'd put it in a plastic trash bag and leave it on the side of the road, or they'd put them into cars.
Right.
And during that time when I was there, it was very prevalent, a lot of that kind of activity going after Iraqi citizens, U.S. troops, and all of our allies on the ground. So I'm almost out of gas with my wingman, who's a little frazzled, and he's like, I go, hey, there's a hot spot here. And a lot of times the hot spot's just, it's not like a buried explosive device. So I was like, there's a hot spot here and there's here. He goes, hey, you know what? We've only got you for just a little bit of time. And as he's talking to me, I'm running my pod up the road. He goes, it's just a little bit of time. He's having a nightmare.
Oh.
He's chasing rabbits in his sleep.
It was getting more intense.
Yeah, it was.
Like your story.
Yeah, he's excited.
Sorry.
So this day, he said, I don't have much time, so I just want I want you to let me see if you see. And as he's saying this, I'm slowly moving my pod, the camera up along this road. He goes, I want to, if you see people actively digging a hole. And as he's saying this, my pod goes on to these guys that are shovels, throw shovels in the back of a truck, and boom, the truck goes off that direction. So for my wingman, I was like, hey, I want you to target that truck that's headed out to the east. And there was one of the guys just starts running off to the north or west north. So he's following this truck, and he and I have deconfliction on altitude. So he's like higher than me and I'm at the bottom. But now he has to coordinate his own airspace, and the truck moves a lot faster than a guy on foot.
Right.
So the guy on foot goes, and he's running along, and he goes into a herd of sheep. And it's harder than you would think. And it's kind of towards the end of the day, like, it's like, well, I'm pretty sure that's him. And you're changing different like views on the pod and trying to use the television camera. And, towards the end of the day, the thermal picture gets really kind of blurred out. So it gets harder. But I'm like, man, he kind of came in from the south and he went to the north. And that's definitely not a sheep. That's like now walking out of this herd of sheep. And then he keeps going north and he goes into a soccer game. And he's running around kicking balls and all this kind of stuff in this like soccer game. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I've got him, but I don't know. But the subject that I'm following comes out that went into the south. He went out to the north and keeps going out. In the meantime, my wingman has like lost the ability to track the truck because he couldn't coordinate the airspace to keep with him. So I was like, all right, come on back. And we're separated by a good amount of distance. And the guy that I think it is, comes out of the soccer game and he goes into a house. And the JTAC's like, yeah, we'll get, this together for you. And, we'll go be ready to drop on this house. And I was like, man, like, I'm pretty sure, but we have to be 100% sure. And I'm definitely not 100% sure right now if that's the same person, but, probably is. And I was like, and, we're almost out of gas. And he goes, yeah, we'll send a quick reaction team that's in the area out to the house. He goes, but I want, we're going to let him know that we're here and we see him. So we're going to do a low show of force. And we'd go over as fast as we could, as low as we could, and we'd pop out flares. So can you imagine you just dug a hole and planted an IED and all of a sudden there's like F-16s like over your house. So we did that. But as we were going in, I'm like, hey, like rejoin with me and we're going to do the show of force. He's like, yeah. And there's contracts in flying in a 2-ship or a 4-ship. And one of 2's contracts is that he's always going to be visual and be in formation and tell me when he's not. And he owns a lot of the deconfliction between the 2 of us. And so this day I was like, all right, he's like visual, he's rejoining on me. We go over this house, I'm like popping out flares and I bank my wings to turn and something was just like, something's not right. And the hairs on the back of my neck stood up and I look over in time and I would have done like a 7G pull
into him.
Yeah. And I bank my wings, I set my wings and I haven't yanked back on the stick yet. And whoo, he goes right past me. We would have had a midair right over this house had I not just like used my spidey sense to be like, he's a amazing pilot. He had a really bad day. He's a young kid,
Oof.
And I knew he had some ground to make up and looked over and I was like, man, like that was freaking close and really scary. So we landed and one of the leaders in the squadron wanted to like rip this guy a new one. And it's like, man, like he did the best he could. We didn't like nothing bad happened. Like I debriefed him. We definitely got good learning lessons out of this. But
did he lose situational awareness? What was going on? Why was the overtake so fast, so high? And
I think he just was trying to affect the rejoin and then was trying to find where the house was. And so, you're a single seat pilot in a single seat aircraft and you have to be checking on your armament and your fuel and your engine state and your weapon state. And there was a lot going on. And, we in the fighter community, one of the things that's the first to go when you're getting test saturated is your communication. So a lot of times you can tell if people aren't making the right radio calls. They're usually kind of getting a little bit behind the jet.
Helmet fire.
So, but the whole day was actually the guys that I had worked with, the Army dudes, came back and they said, this is one of the most successful missions out of a 2-ship of Vipers that I've ever seen in the country during the Operation Iraqi Freedom. And when they sent the Army there to check out the house, they found this like huge cache of weapons and fake passports from another country there. And they had gun residue on these guys' hands. And so we definitely kept, people safe that day, even though we were managing a lot inside of our flight. You can have a bad day and you can still do an awesome job.
Yeah. It had, I think there are people those that have and those that will, right?
Yeah.
So I remember writing or talking about something once, like, man, as pilots, it's so easy for people in their zero knot chair to criticize pilots.
Mhm.
And I always say, well, I wouldn't do that. How do you know? You're going fast,
Yeah.
and you don't have a lot of time. Your reaction time is different. You're flying in formation, double that or triple that to what's going on. And sometimes you lose the bubble. Doesn't mean that you're going to be held accountable, but I think as pilots, we're all humble. Like, we're not laughing at the guy because he did it, because
Right.
that could be us at any moment.
Yeah.
And so we recognize that, and it's our job to help your brother or your sister that's flying to be better, to learn from the mistakes, and we just keep moving on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, in your communities that you were in, did you have like squadron standards? And it was basically the unwritten rules. Like I said, like two's job is to stay visual and make sure that they don't hit the flight lead, and to tell you if, things got
Yes.
out of hand. And there's, that's oversimplifying. The standards were usually like 15, 20 pages long, but that was the level set baseline for the professionals in our squadron. These are our contracts to each other, and everything else, that all the missions you do are built upon that agreement.
Right. So I didn't fly as much formation as you, but like the Navy and the Air Force, when we fly formation, that's what we talk about. We have those contracts, those unspoken things that you're supposed to be responsible for. If you screw up, say you screw up, and to fix a problem, you have to say that you have a problem first and not gloss it over and say, it was just a bad day. No, man, it could turn into 2 bad days, and next time you might kill someone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, we talk about integrity, like, it's important.
Mm-hmm.
It's important for us. So,
yeah,
that's cool. But damn.
That's
Damn.
scary.
Like,
I'll never forget it.
and then you're like,
yeah, it just, man, you
just
roll,
like,
set, pull, and if I had not roll, set, peak, we would have been just,
it's like being
fireworks.
it's like being on the highway,
Yeah.
changing lanes in California, 6-lane highway. You don't look, and you see some freaking person come
Yeah.
down, or a motorcycle. It's really quiet until they're like level with
Yeah.
you.